Greetings, everyone. How are you doing today? Good. Right. So as you saw the slides coming across the screen and the images, I want you to just take a moment. You don't have to put that into the chat or anything. I just want you to take a moment and just think to yourself of how you want to see, how you want to show up in this moment today. And just take a minute to think about that. During these crazy times, take a minute just to think about that. As more individuals are coming into the room. All right. Now I know as we're starting today's session, it's 7 p.m. at night. My name is AK, like 7 p.m. at night. And I just want to do a quick temperature check, right? I know we have little ones who might have been working, but from a scale from 1 to 4, in terms of 1 being like a little bit exhausted, a little tired, I just need to get my day handled, and a 4 would be like, I'm ready to roll. Like just from a scale from 1 to 4, so 1 to 4, 1 being like, I need a second to collect myself, and 4 feeling like I'm ready. Just put your hands up about how you're feeling at the moment. Just a quick temperature check. Got 3s, 2s, 4s. Okay. I just want to make sure that we check on that because especially as things are going on, I just want to take a moment just to see where everybody is at. Now, as we, show up for 2021, I think we can all admit that it's only been 13 days and it's already been a wild one, especially from our 2020. But to start the day, I really want to introduce Rabbi Stern to just kick off the event today on things and how we got to this moment today. But Rabbi?
Thanks, AK. Good evening, everyone. So nice to have everyone gathered. As a person who loves this country, as a person whose family came to this country on one side in the late 1800s and the other side that came after the Holocaust, the notion of freedom and a place of comfort and refuge has always been so deep in my soul. And another part has been all about how significant Judaism is and how it informs the decisions I make, the values that I have, the things that I say, the things that I do. And it's not like the past 4 years haven't been bad enough to challenge those core concepts of my life as it relates to being a citizen. But it's now to add to that what we witnessed last week, something terrifying. Never imagining the word insurrection would be used in relation to something that happens in our country, led by ostensibly the person who was voted in 2016 to be the leader of the country. I don't know how to compute it all, but it points out there are profound issues that we have to deal with. And the thing about it is there's no, well, we need to balance it out. There's this side and there's that side. There is no equivalency here. This is not like something else. This is this. And how we deal with it as individuals, as citizens, as people of this country, and as members of a congregation. It's a statement about where we stand. It's about our communal values, who and what we believe in. And one of the places that today I couldn't believe that there was a comparison trying to be made between the people that stormed the Capitol and those who were violent during summer demonstrations after George Floyd. I thought it was some sick, twisted SNL joke, but there's an attempt in every situation to reframe our understanding of what is real and right. I mean, on a very deep level, tonight we're gathered because this is the right thing to do. This is the right thing to do. To respond to evil, to respond to violence. And the way that we choose to respond is because we understand that so much that has gone on relates to a deep, deep racism in this country. And it's time for us to reckon with that. It's time for us to acknowledge that and then figure out, how do we walk forward together? I was thinking, as different as, pull out some average Black guy and some average white guy, and they might have so many things that are not in common, right? So many things that are different. But I promise you, if AK and I were sitting together watching the news on Wednesday, we would both be looking at the pictures that we saw in the lead-in to this evening. And we would be horrified by the same images as they relate to those images that threaten a kind of deep-seated vulnerability that we have. How do we deal with that? How do we respond to that? How do we see each other as allies moving forward? And how do we, as white people of privilege, include our reckoning with our color and seek a greater good? That's what we're here to do. And it sounds incredibly complicated, and it is. I will not say that any of this is easy. And if it feels uncomfortable, it's supposed to feel uncomfortable, because it has to be, because we're trying to find a lever to raise up lots of boulders that have been kept sealed over so much pain and so much that is so unjust. And so we're here to think about that, to frame it as a community, and ultimately to do the right thing.
Thank you. You know, just to build off that, we're going to start momentarily. I believe, today it's obviously an emotional topic, and it's evident, especially with the events of this week. And it's not only dividing our nation, but it's also creating a rift within our communities and even in our homes, like in the news and on social media feeds, and even in our daily interactions. And oftentimes we want to keep these conversations on the surface, but we're realizing by not engaging, it's not actually bridging the gap as we saw. It's simply creating a different reality, one that I'm sure most of us are unsure how to actually repair. Now, a lot of us are talking about a roadmap. So here's a little bit about the roadmap. There's a profound quote by the late Wayne Dyer, and he says, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Now, why this initiative first started, we decided to take a little bit of a different approach. Now, instead of putting out resources and starting out from the outside in, we decided to go from the inside out, starting with understanding ourselves. And now we're all members of TBA, but from what we saw from the first session, you are much more than that. Your experiences are much more. The roles you play within the congregation, inside and outside, in the dining rooms, in the boardrooms, and even in the communities. Now, as we move forward, when we start thinking about it, it's more of this introspective process that we've been going through. But today, our focus is this. I want us to not think of ourselves as just TBA members, but I want us to think of this as a mastermind group. We're all working together with our shared experiences to work together to also solve some of these problems together, not only in the congregation, but also within our homes. But to do that, I want to make sure that we first level set and feel comfortable to actually share with this environment. So in a moment, I'm going to put a link into the chat, and I want you to answer 2 questions. And the first question is, in what ways is TBA doing well when it comes to creating a safe space for people to share freely, regardless of background, without fear of judgment? And then the second one is, in what ways does TBA need to improve when it comes? Now, the reason why we're asking these questions is because we want to make sure, as we're talking about these important topics, that we are level setting and make sure that we are addressing the issues to make sure as we share, we feel safe and we feel supported while we are doing that. And momentarily, I'm going to put a link into the chat, and there's just 2 questions. And then as you are filling out these questions, you'll actually see some of these responses coming up into the screen. But just take a second to think about it. And when you do, go into the link and just answer these 2 questions. Like, what is it that you need here today that would really make you feel the most ready, the most supported to really dive in deep onto some of the issues that we're going to be talking about today? Give me a couple minutes to do that. Coming in, more opportunities to talk. We're all in this together. Honesty, willingness to be vulnerable, recognition that we're all willing to do better, whatever that means. Participation. More of these discussions through consciousness. Right. Small group discussions. So as we're going to cycle through both of these, see both of these. Right. So our goal here is to really be focusing on more of these discussions, right? Having more of these opportunities to share with one another, honesty, willingness, and on both sides as a listener, and also the individual that is speaking. So take just 30 seconds just to look at some of these responses. Okay. And also what are doing well, so we can answer both of these as well. Okay. So to go to one point, especially, is we're going to actually go to the next step and actually start to engage in some of these conversations. Just a reminder that we are all in this together. So in a moment, we wanted to start thinking about, like, how did we get here today as we start to have some of these conversations, and to talk about not just what happened last week, but overall within the history of the United States, or even the Jewish identity. And to speak more on that, just have Rabbi Stern talk more about how did we get here all together as a nation in the historical context.
Thanks, AK. I think a place to begin is to acknowledge that Jewish history for 2,000 years is based around the experience of the diaspora, of being a minority within a frequently hostile environment. That sense of vulnerability is a part of who we are. The stories of places from which we've been expelled, the places over history we have been persecuted, where violence has been used against us with impunity, has created for us what is surely in any kind of classical context, psychological, spiritual, in any context, has created within any Jewish soul millennia of trauma. And part of the ongoing power of Judaism has been to live with that trauma and seek to find a way to higher ground despite it. And I would have to say that the struggles have been extraordinary. And I think what's developed out of that are a few different things, a few different responses. And I think it's kind of like when we read in the Passover Haggadah about the 4 children, the one who's wise, the one who's wicked, the one who's simple, the one who doesn't know how to ask. That when we look at those 4 categories, we're all of those, right? We're all of those children. There are different times in our life when we're all of those people, and we're all those people all together. I'm talking multiple personalities. I'm just talking about all the different levels of understanding and vulnerability and intelligence that we have. And so one of those levels in regards to our vulnerability is to be extraordinarily defensive and to look at everyone and everything as the enemy. And you may be related to someone or given our generation span tonight, but we have, as part of our generations, Jews who were extremely prejudiced against Christians, against Black people, against Puerto Rico, about anyone who was not Jewish, because no one could be trusted. That is part of our inheritance. And to know people like that is to be profoundly uncomfortable in their presence and profoundly uncomfortable with the legacy that they leave. And I wanted to start with that uncomfortable place, because there's a part of Jewish life that responds to that vulnerability by doing the opposite, by looking at other vulnerable people and saying, I know who you are. I know what you experience. And to understand that it says 36 times in the Torah to look out for the orphan and the widow and the stranger in your midst. And you do that because you know what they're experiencing, because you were a stranger in the land of Egypt. All those times, almost 40 times it says that. And there's a part of us that takes that message, and everywhere we go, we want to know. We are first up. And I'm sure Black people hate when people like me say this, but the first president of the NAACP was a Jewish person. That's crazy. It's crazy for a lot of reasons, but it's evidence of the notion that there was a Jew who thought there needs to be this society, right? Because there was the ADL, Anti-Defamation League, and there had to be something in its equivalence for people of color. We're that. If you look at the list of revolutionaries throughout the world, you will find ultimately within the first couple levels, there are Jews, and they express their Judaism with a disdain for the tradition as it's seen in a synagogue, but what they do is they embrace the imperative to do good. Jews who do good through social justice, and they want to be present. And these 2 different pieces are part of the whole of Jewish life. And I think sometimes there is also the immigrant response. That in fact, Martin Luther King, I just was rereading a speech that he gave. Jews have told Black people this, Italian, all immigrant groups with white skin have essentially said, we lifted ourselves up by our bootstraps, how come you don't? And we know Jews who speak that, who say everyone has a chance in this country. We had a chance and we used it, you should too. Without, as King explained, that's assuming that everyone has a pair of boots on. It is this that is also a part of who and what we are. And so we have these different not warring, but these different components of how we understand ourselves and what the Jewish response is supposed to be. And I think what's happened predominantly is that Jewish people of America sought, with all of these warring aspects, sought to make it in this country. Like everybody who comes, it would seem to me, people in this country want to get ahead. They want a piece of the American dream as it's advertised, which means wealth and comfort and status and power. And Jews struggled hard for that. Don't forget, Jews in many places into the 20th century were not considered white. They were considered other. So it said no country clubs and certain stores, no Blacks, no Jews, no dogs allowed. But ultimately, Jews worked hard at pushing through that because ultimately, what could we do? With enough power, we could build a hospital for Jewish doctors who were denied practice at any other hospitals. I love telling the story that when Estee Lauder moved to Palm Beach, she said, I want to join the country club. And they said, her advisor said, Estee, sorry, but the policy is no Jews allowed. And she paused and said, okay, we'll build our own. That is a part of Jewish know-how, can do, pushing in and taking what we believe is rightfully ours and being able to do that because our skin is white, doing that by changing our names, doing that with a variety of plastic surgeries that we wouldn't, quote unquote, look Jewish. All of these things are part of the noise in our heads when we come to the table and say, we have a responsibility to our Black brothers and sisters because it's the moral right thing to do. We share a sense of alienation that Jews have worked hard to push away. It's difficult sometimes for Jews to deal with this because we realize it evokes our own vulnerability. And again, to look at that picture from the Capitol and see a dude holding a Confederate flag and next to him a dude wearing a t-shirt that says Camp Auschwitz. You know, every picture tells a story. We share certain commonalities that we need to recognize and bring together and work on together. We are in a position of privilege. It was a big deal when Jews 40 years ago had any kind of senior vice president position in a Fortune 500 corporation. It was a big deal. It's not a big deal anymore. I'm not saying that there is no prejudice left. Of course there is. But Jews have bought the dream, our ability to assimilate, our ability to be part of the general American society is profound. But we can't forget in the end that vulnerability is not unwarranted. There are reasons for us to be concerned for our own safety, and it is a reason for us to be concerned about the safety, the welfare of the Black community that lives side by side with us. So our work is complex and necessary because how can we ultimately acknowledge that message from Torah that message that says, be careful and look out for the stranger and the widow and the orphan. What is that empathy about? It's about remembering who and what we were and continue to be, this complicated whole that makes us who we are. This is an invitation to do more. I don't know how you were feeling since Wednesday afternoon, but I look forward today because I felt, at least in this context, we're being given some tools to do something, to reach out to the Black community and say, in ways that we've never, it's been a long time since we've understood this, we are truly in this particular battle together. And it's up to us together to make a difference in the culture in which we live. Does this transform Temple Beth Avodah? I think the concept does. I think it puts us in to a relationship that we need to develop for the long haul. Because what we need to do is not small, is not insignificant. It's life-changing and congregation-changing. But if not now, when? Thanks.
Thank you, Rabbi Stern, for just sharing that and talking about vulnerability, talking about how it being complex. And something came to my mind while you were talking, and it was the notion of assimilation and using plastic surgery or whatever it needs to be. And an image came to my mind, and that was of Michael Jackson. And Michael Jackson has done plastic surgery, he's lightened his skin, but no matter what he does, he's still going to be Black. Meaning the journey of similarities of the Jewish experience and the Black American experience are very similar. But for African Americans, it is hard to assimilate. And so the factor of color is still very prominent and still very important. But as Rabbi Stern offered an invitation, we're also going to offer the invitation to you to dive in deeper and have some really important conversations. Now, in a moment, we're going to put you into breakout rooms in groups of 5 to discuss some really important topics. And hopefully you can remember what we talked about, like what is it that's going to make this a free and safe place to discuss, and knowing that we're all really coming from different places, different experience levels. But I want us to just share our own stories, share our own thoughts, because we can only grow as much as we're willing to look internally within ourselves. Now, there's a question we're all going to address in our breakout rooms together. And the question is, how have the events over the past year shaped your thoughts on your Jewish identity and what role it has played in addressing race or racism in your community, right? Within this question, I want you to think about it really internally, not only just at the higher level, but really internally. And to help guide this question or this conversation, we're given 3 different points that you can discuss. First one is, what are your reflections or reactions from Rabbi Stern's teachings? 2, what are some thoughts to the word white privilege in terms of your Jewish identity, and how does it play a role in addressing racism in America? And where do you feel your experience is similar to the Black American experience, and where do you feel it differs? Now, to come back, I want to give everybody to think about maybe some potential aha moments or what you discussed in the group as you bring it back. But as these groups are with 5 individuals, I want to have everybody have a chance to not only speak, but at the same time also listen. So momentarily, we're going to be putting you into breakout rooms and giving you some of these questions to reflect on a much, much deeper level. Now, before we go, is there any questions before we break you out? The goal is to just have an open conversation with the members in your breakout rooms. You'll see the questions in the chat putting here that you can focus on. And then also come back with any aha moments about what you discussed. But we're going to give you, actually, let's say 15 minutes 15 minutes to discuss, and then come back and we may be jumping into the rooms, but be open, share, and really try to dive in deep to having these really deep and meaningful conversations. If everyone is in, I just want to bring it into the group, as myself and Rabbi Sam didn't jump in, but I'd be interested to hear what everyone talked about, or some aha moments that came within your groups.
I can share one.
Okay.
I think one of the aha moments we had was how much more sophisticated our children are than we were as teenagers. And someone was pointing out that their parents used words like schwarza, and if we said that now, our kids would be absolutely appalled. And I just think that I'm proud of them. This generation is more aware than we were. And that was something that we all sort of agreed upon in our group.
Yeah, thank you, Stacy. Thank you. Anne.
When we just right before we left, I said something, and a couple other people were like, "Yeah, I was thinking the same thing." And it's really just that, you know, these meetings, like the numbers are kind of diminishing as the meetings go, which is, you know, natural attrition or whatever. But you know, the concern about, like, are we talking to ourselves? Like, are we all on the same page? Probably, pretty much anyway. And so we're just kind of like diving deeper into our own desire to be self-aware and do good and think better, et cetera, et cetera. What about all these other people in our congregation and in the community who either don't agree with this, that there's really a problem, or they think they agree with it? Like Nina was saying, she was talking to someone who said they were liberal, like I'm liberal, and then they were talking about race, and Nina thought, this person really isn't liberal, like what they're saying really, it doesn't sound liberal, but they think they are. So why would, you know, just that whole, it's just kind of a strange situation.
Interesting. And I saw some head nods and some laughter. Anyone want to build on what Anne said?
If I could just say, in response to that, a long time ago, Rabbi Larry Kushner taught me a really significant principle on this very issue of who's showing up, who attends, and shouldn't we be worrying about this group or that group. And he said, Stern, he said, worry about the people that show up. And that is deeply meaningful to me, that if what we're doing together is ultimately what is creating a stronger sense of commitment and involvement for each one of us individually and collectively, Dayenu, like that's really good in and of itself.
So don't be concerned about the other people, just be concerned about the group that's coming.
I wouldn't say don't be concerned with, but people who are willing to show up, to not worry about who's not showing up, but rather to be concerned about educating and raising up the people that are willing to stand with you and take the time to listen and learn and grow.
Got it. Thank you.
In respect that they would then go to help educate the others, Rabbi, you know, if you work with those that show up,
You know,
the word would spread and they would help to educate or rise above with the others, or
I mean, that's one certainly good and positive outcome, but I think a great outcome is for all of us who are gathered tonight to be edified and to be inspired to do whatever it is we're going to do. Will other people join us? I hope so. I would assume so. But if not, it doesn't change the purposefulness and the meaning of what we're doing.
And to touch on that as well, I think the events of this past week helped us realize that it's, you know, it's not just up here, right? You may know what you want to do, but when you're actually faced with it, sometimes it's not as easy as you thought to have those difficult conversations with somebody that may say something that you don't necessarily align with at your dinner table, or it may not be as easy to just engage, right? Oftentimes we feel like if we don't engage or we don't talk about it, nothing happens, but as we realize, things actually getting worse. And the reason why I think it's really powerful for everyone to even be on this call is it's going to be a quick segue into what we're going to talk about momentarily, is actually saying, what are we willing to do, right? What are we, like, how are we going to, pull up our sleeves and take those next steps, not only within a congregation, but within our own personal lives as well. But before we go to that, I want to say, like, Robin, you had something as well.
Yeah, our group talked about a lot of different things, but I think one of the things that rattled us a little bit was the topic of Trump signing the executive order to recognize Jews as a different race. And I think all of us, including myself, said, well, that didn't happen. And so we quickly Googled and found that it did. And still some of them are like, well, he didn't win that one because, we're not, we're Ashkenazi, we're Sephardic, we're this, that. But I just pinged one of my sources on this call to say, am I understanding this right? And so that's, I don't know if we call it an aha moment or like, oh shit moment, pardon me, that like, and the article that I posted in our chat that confirms that, and sorry if I'm taking us down a rat hole, because that's not my intention, but it frames him signing this executive order as something really positive to, support, that anti-Semitism now is a broader term, and that we're protected, we get more protection for it in courts and such. So, but when we talked about it, it was a little scary to think that, like, it just made us feel vulnerable.
Right.
And Rabbi's comment of, Jews were like blacks, and dogs, the way we were being recognized in the past, and now hearing that Jews, have to identify themselves potentially. Now, Trump hasn't enacted this yet, but it's been passed as an executive order. So that just, it could create some vulnerabilities. And kind of the bridge to this, our connection with blacks is that blacks have been living with these vulnerabilities all the time. And now there's something more we have in common.
Right. And to do that, we're going to put a link in the chat momentarily, but I want us to take this next step, as this is brought up a few times, on what we can actually do to take the next steps together. Like I said, the beginning of this conversation was not to think about, yes, we're all part of the same congregation, but we all have different, professions. We all have different roles we play within the community. And there's things that we could potentially do today and address what's going on, not only around the world, but in the church and also our communities. Now, I want you to take just 2 minutes. We're almost finished for today. And I want you to answer these two questions, or think about them, and mainly from the I perspective. And those two questions are, how will we address racism at the kitchen table, in the temple, and within our own beliefs? Right? And number two is, what are specific action steps we're willing to take? Okay, so I want you to just think about this for 3 minutes, because beforehand it seems very high level, but now it's taking this very, very personal. What can we do to address racism at the kitchen table? in the temple, and even in our beliefs. Oh, and there's obviously, I said 2 question ones. Let's put that question 1 and question 2. And what are specific action steps we are willing to take? And I want you to just think about maybe like 3 things that you're willing to do, especially after you're having the conversation and what Rabbi Stern had to say as well. What are you willing to do? What are you willing to do? Think about just 3. What are 3 things we're willing to do? And then when you're ready, what I want you to do is just select one of them and put that into the chat. Just one of them.
I'm sorry, are we supposed to fill out this Google spreadsheet just individually? We're not doing breakout rooms to do it? Is that what you said?
So what we're going to do is, because I know time-wise, what we can do in terms of the breakout rooms, what we'll do is, actually, I mean, how long would it take to put them in?
I have it.
Listen,
I
you're-
can just open the breakout rooms now if you want.
Okay. So what we'll have you do, we'll finish it on like, put you in the breakout rooms for like 4 minutes and then bring it back. But just put your thoughts on what you would do personally, and then also some specific action steps to address these 2 questions. All right, so we'll give you about 4 minutes to do that when the breakout links will come, and then we'll come back. Okay. So as we're coming in, as we close this today, like this is only an hour. We took, obviously over, but these conversations are big ones. And when we think about what's going on, the goal here isn't about what we can only do within the congregation, because like I said beforehand, our roles are so much bigger outside, right? Stacy's works at Boston College, is an educator and a speaker. We have individuals all across this room that have different roles where they can make an impact. Now, just to briefly take off the facilitator hat for a moment, kind of the elephant in the room is I am a Black male. You may not have known, but just in case.
I
Crazy,
never would have
right?
guessed.
Just in case you didn't know. And a question that often comes up, especially when the George Floyd situation came up, was people like, what can we do? Like, what can we do? As I got phone calls and people reached out to me. And there was this video that came out recently regarding these protests, the DC Capitol situation by Steve Harvey. And he had a really powerful quote, and we'll send you some of these resources afterwards. And he says, people are finally seeing what we have known all along. Meaning people are seeing what we have known all along. Now, it's not about, how many books somebody should read. It's not about the action steps that people need to take. Because at the end of the day, our goal is just like, hey, this is going on. We want you to be more aware. And the more that you're more aware, you realize it will start to change the way that you move throughout the world. It may change, oh, you know what? That particular book, I could pick up and read it and get some more information. Or within my organization, I might consider new ways of thinking about hiring and, recruiting. Or I may even decide how I'm going to spend my time in the way that I want to give back, or even how I decide to address housing issues in my area. So the reason why this is so important is because, to be honest, I don't know the full solution, right? I don't know the solution to end racism in America. My goal has always just been, how can we understand, not only understanding my side or our side, but also understanding your side as well, from our shared experience and also from our different ones. So as I move forward today, on whatever we put down on the spreadsheet about what we decide to do in terms of action steps, that is a step moving forward. Because it's more than just through here, it's more through here. And that's really, I think, at the end of the day, what we're all asking for. How can you see me, not just for the color of my skin or just for who I decide to worship every weekend, but see me for all the different layers of who we are. See, at the end of the day, we're not asking for more. People aren't asking for more. We're just asking for the same. And
just to, that's great. I mean, obviously that needs to be said. And I also think that it's so unfortunate that we're seeing what Black and brown people have known for centuries after traumatic, very obvious, hit us in the face with it events, with pictures and videos and deaths and beatings and George Floyd. Oh, we're all up in the air. Oh, storm the Capitol, and we're up in the air. But if we have a bout of time that's nice and peaceful and quiet for us, nice white people who don't have to live with this every day, can we please keep up our level of in the heart and in the mind and not wait for something else tragic to happen before it gets us interested again? That's all.
yeah, I +1 that, because it is very important. And that's really what it is. To Anne's point is, when someone brought up, maybe not attending or the numbers are down, at the end of the day, we realize that not doing anything doesn't solve the situation. Whether it's 1, whether it's 20, whether it's 50, the decisions that we do when we leave here, the action steps are really what's going to make the impact. So I just want to say thank you to engaging on a 7 p.m. on a Wednesday, especially after all of these events, right? Because not a lot of people are willing to engage in these. And it's also for me to learn more about you as well, because I believe that we all have a lot more in common than actually separates us. And that's really what I hope for you today and the action steps that you take. Now, the final piece, and I'm going to pass it off to Margie, is I know we're looking for this roadmap, but our goal is not to just be one-off events, but to continue in these conversations. That's what it looked like people were asking for, is more of these conversations. Today was only 20 minutes. Hopefully we want them to be longer, but we don't have to wait until the week, but feeling comfortable to have these conversations at our dinner table, to change those perspectives, to have those conversations, and then move on forward from here. Just want to say thank you for taking your time, and I'll pass it off to Margie.
Okay. As always, AK and Rabbi, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to put this in a context that we can just wrap our heads around, giving us an anchor in our own Judaism and linking that, our history, our own Jewish journeys, along with what has happened today is hugely important in what we do going forward. And it's just really, really helpful to understand the complexity around that. Hopefully everybody had a chance to hear different perspectives. I mean, I had 2 great groups, which I wish we had at least an hour, to go through and hear some of the stories that drove the passion behind where we are today, and obviously like why you're participating. I personally have been working in this field generally on equity issues in healthcare my whole career, but that's been more in the head. And I think that what's been happening, and maybe this is to your point, that it is just at home. This is not them. This is not TV. This is in our backyards. I was saying to our group before that there was a Black woman who was at Countryside an hour before school, and there was somebody in the community who called the police on her, and it turns out it was a teacher. God. It was a teacher. There was a young woman who was running for city council. She's a sophomore, I think, at Harvard, and an activist, and she has received death threats for her views on Black Lives Matters and asking some of the questions about public safety. This is happening in our community. And what I'm hoping is that through this journey to date, we've gotten the counsel from AK, who's brought many, many people of different backgrounds, whether it's in the corporate. I know that you've had corporate clients, and we're obviously a synagogue client, but what do we do now that we understand ourselves? Like, what's our unique connection to this? Like, what do we feel motivated by that in our heart of hearts? is what we want to contribute to the world, right? So that's what the personal identity was. And then the next one was, how do we relate as a Jewish community, and understanding what is that shared experience that we have, you know, whether it's anti-Semitism that drives you or just the drive towards social justice, you know, positive or negative. And then now seeing the bridge towards what is the intersection between what Jews and the Black or people of color, those communities, what do we share? And what is our unique obligation given where we are in society? What can we do with that privilege? What can we do? So I guess that's really what we're hoping the next phase of our work will be. And to Rabbi and AK's point, Becky has helped us to organize a process that is organic. There's not a preordained structure about, you know, then we're going to do this and then we're going to do that. It's driven by this core group. And what I would hope is that in addition to getting more feedback about what you want to see next, this last exercise that AK had us do of what is it you want to do is going to drive some of the support that we want to provide you. Like, so if you are really motivated by some of the discrimination that is going on in our very community, we want to know, is that something that we want to delve deeper? Do we want to find out what actions you can take to make a difference there? Health disparities, education disparities. There are a whole bunch of areas of systemic racism that we can certainly share the resources, but the structure around action is something that we want to figure out. How is it that we want to support it? So that's what we're thinking would be maybe the next series of things that we would provide to the community are some options of areas which really are close to home, whether they're navigating difficult conversations within your family. That's some of what my subgroup talked about. You know, maybe people want support on that. How do you deal with somebody who's unfriended you? How do you deal with a dear family member who you vehemently think that they're racist? How do you deal with somebody that you love and try to move it forward? How do you deal with that? So if you can continue to think about what things you would like to do and what resources we can do together, what things we can do together as a community. There's certainly things we can do on our own. If you could just send that to me, how? My email is mrossdector@comcast.net. I'll actually have Becky or AK include that in our follow-up email as we're sharing some of those resources. If you could please share some of those ideas of what kinds of issues we want to delve deeper into take action would be super helpful. How many of you, I just want to take a quick poll from 1 to 4, AK's scale, feel like that is the next step? 4 means you strongly agree, 1 means you don't really agree, is that you are ready to take some action. How many people feel that? 1 is like no, 2 is like I don't know, not ready yet. 4. Okay. I thought you might say that. 5. So here's what I also think. In addition to sharing with me your what your ideas are for some of those topics, I'd like for you to reach out to some other folks in the temple. I'd like for you to share, what is it that has got you raising your hand and saying like, you are ready to take action and we've got to bring them along. You know, it's just not that easy for everybody to do this on their own. But I think as a community, I think that we can really make a bigger difference by bringing more people to the table. So with that, I just wanted to say thank you all for participating, because that is really what made this rich, was you're just being able to share some very personal experiences. And it was really very, very moving. Anyway, I don't want to have the last word. I'm going to kick it to Rabbi, Becky, AK, just to say, you know, anything else other than, you know, we're just so grateful to have each other in our health right now. And I'm grateful for the outpouring of support to make a difference as a community. Anyone?
And I would say to the last word, I would say you had the last word. It was very strong. It was very powerful. It gave people an action, and you shared from your heart. So this sounds like it's my last word, but it shouldn't be my last word, because yours was actually the last word. But like we said, it's an ongoing issue, and we're doing this, and we're all in this together, as somebody said. So we're all in this together, and let's continue on together, because as you've seen this weekend, or this past week, it's not just a Black issue. It's also, you know, there was still anti-Semitic stuff that was studied as well. We're in this together, hand in hand.